Okay, I think we might be live here. Okay, I think we might be live. Cool, it's working. That's exciting. Well, hello, welcome to this, the first History Chats here in May. If you're watching this after the fact, I'll give the standard disclaimer. We're going to leave this open for about 5 minutes. I'm starting a little early than we normally would today. So you can just jump ahead in if you're watching the recording of it, you don't have to sit here live and watch for 5 minutes. You can just skip ahead. Yeah, but for those of you who are joining us live, welcome. Yeah, let's see. Went live a little early today because I'm using a different program to be our streaming thing here. So just wanted to make sure it works, and it looks like it's working. So that's pretty cool. I'm just gonna go do our standard checking the different locations. Make sure that it sounds okay. Should be pretty good. You never know. Yeah, it looks like that's working. I think we might be live. Cool. Oh, I don't know if you can actually. Can you hear? Whoops, you probably heard me checking my own volume. That's weird. Again, new program I'm using. Usually we've been streaming through Zoom, which is helpful when we're doing it, with another person who has to do it remotely. But for doing it all in one room, like when it's just me, it's more helpful to use a different program. I'm using OBS now, so I think I have it kind of a handle on it, but you never know. It's good to make sure that it's working. Okay, so I am cool. Thank you for the feedback here. Oop, yeah, cool. So yeah, we're gonna get. I'll just leave a couple minutes here. So let's start. I hope you're all having a wonderful afternoon. I guess now it is. I guess while we're sitting here, we can make a point. Let's see here. Can thank our sponsors for the program here for History Speaks. Yankee Bookstore has been sponsoring us this year. So a big thank you to them for their sponsorship. And for this month, because it's Historic Preservation Month, the Friends of the Wausau Historic Landmarks have reached out and generously offered to sponsor the programming for this month as well. So a big thanks to them as well for their support of the program. And of course, always have to say to all of our members and people who, help sustain the Marathon County Historical Society in the general sense, as well as these programmings. So, again, if you're joining us here, and you're not a member, and you're looking for an opportunity to support a historical society and preservation of our local history, it's a great opportunity there. If you want to become a member, you can check our website, marathoncountyhistory.org, and that will get you all the information you need. Or you can give us a call or email or what have you as well. So that. Okay, we're just getting close here to the time. I guess so. Before we get started, if you're joining us for the first time here, welcome. The way the format is going to work here, I'm going to give a little bit of a history for about 15-20 minutes. If at any point you have any questions or comments or suggestions or what have you, please feel free to put that in the comment chat section, because we will have an opportunity to do some question and answer later. There's a lot of stuff with the Plumer Mansion or the Plumer House here, so I had to kind of tell a story. But if there's something that's you want to know more about at any point, please put that in the comment, and we'll see if we can answer those questions at the end. So I think that's all the standard disclaimers. I'll make sure that I'm recording here. Yep, good. So with that, I think we'll maybe get started here. I'm going to go to, hey, there I am. Cool. Just take a drink here real quick. Yeah, so let's get started here. Thank you for joining us. They're going to be talking here about the Plumer Mansion. This is the first of our, again, the first in a month-long series for Historic Preservation Month, which is pretty cool. We're going to be talking about different stories about the buildings and the stories behind them, and the attempts to try to save them over the years. And you really, a lot of that whole movement really starts here with the Plumer Mansion. I will point out, here I have the Plumer House. That's what I'm calling it in here. And I guess you could kind of, depending on the era, in the way who's describing it, it does change kind of the language. But, it probably should be Plumer Mansion. That's kind of what it's known as for most of its existence. But it is a house, and it's worth mentioning that. This is the home of Daniel Plumer, Daniel Longfellow Plumer, and Mary Jane Draper Plumer. They are some of the early settlers here. They're not early. They're not here before we become Wausau, right? They're not settlers to Big Bull Falls. I don't think. I think they were here after 1850. But they're not too long after 1850. They're very early. Daniel is a banker. He's one of the first bankers here, so he's going to be very influential in that regard. And yeah, they don't have any children, but as time goes on, they kind of look at the community. They're sort of important figures in a lot of different senses, both in the social and sort of business side of things, but also they're philanthropists. They're give back. They're part of the social scene here. And in 1890, they decide that they would like a better house, and so they build the Plumer Mansion, Plumer House. Now, before I talk about the Plumer Mansion itself, it is worth noting, you might be asking, well, why did I pick a bunch of pictures that have trees in the way? Well, let me tell you, they all have trees in the way. This is just one of those buildings that just always has stuff in the way. What are you going to do? That's just kind of the nature of things. Even during winter, you get trees, the branches kind of block the view. But hopefully it's still good enough to kind of get a sense of what it is. So what is the Plumer Mansion? Well, first of all, it's located on 5th Street and Franklin on the corner there. It's not there now. Jumping ahead here, it doesn't exist today, but that's where it was located. The other this is the same block as the First Presbyterian Church, so it's kind of in the opposite corner at this point in time. And it's in the Gothic style. It's the kind of architecture that it would be reminiscent of, and it's definitely a great example of this. To kind of give us a sense of the building as it existed back at this point in time, I'm going to read from an article that came in the Wausau Pilot Review in 1890. Let's see, specifically, I think it's November 25th or something like that. Yes, November 25th. It's entitled The Plumer Mansion, the finest finished and most convenient residence in Wisconsin, a description of the work as it now stands. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a lot like transcribed. It's like 4 pages long. So they go on. It's really interesting to see some of this, but I'm just going to give you a couple highlights here. So on the outside, you can see that there's kind of a distinct, and one of the first things that you often see, the reason that these are postcards, I think this is the only residence in Wisconsin that, or in Wausau or Marathon County really, that I've seen that's been colorized during this era, and that's because it has a very distinct look. It's got multiple kind of materials that made it. And so the article talks about how the lower portion of the building is Wisconsin granite, the most of it being quarried here in Wausau, near Wausau. The upper stories are finished in Indiana pressed brick, and there are terracotta trimmings to complete the whole thing. Now, notable about this, because the granite, it's locally, it's dug out of the ground here in the area, but granite's pretty heavy, so they actually had to lay down some extra railroad track a couple blocks away from the railroad to get here so that they could actually unload it. So that's the extent. To get this, they had to literally build a little bit of a railroad. Then it takes you sort of from the front porch inside. It says that the massive porch first claims attention for its architectural beauty, and the heavy polished columns and trimmings and the rough stonework give an appearance of solidity and simplicity. and then it takes you inside. There's a main hallway. I was going to put some. We have a couple pictures that kind of show on the inside, and I guess I didn't remember to put those in there. But just to give you an idea, it's woodwork, different types of white pine or white oak. Sorry, there's mahogany. There's birch. There's all these really well ornamental woodwork that goes in. There's a main hallway that goes all the way to the other side of the building. There's sort of a reception area. There's kind of blocked off by an arch. There's a library, there's a sitting room, all the sort of places you'd have. On the second floor would be you go up a staircase, a nice ornamental staircase, and that would take you over to the residential area. That's the second floor is where they would sleep, the plumbers would. The servants, of course, would be sleeping on the third floor. That's where you'd put the servants at this point in time. Although also on the third floor, there was a ballroom. And so a couple things about this. Why build in brick and stone? Excuse me. Well, it gives it the ability to make a nice big house that's 3 stories tall. Wood framed, that's not going to be a long term. It's a lot harder to make a 3-story building out of wood at this point in time, and also have a ballroom on the top. That's a lot of vibrations. So they had these nice thick beams, big beams and stonework in order to kind of keep things solid, and also note all of the windows. This is one of those things that to have as many and as big of these windows as they have, and they're pretty cool. There's stained glass in them. There's all this stuff. You have to be able to just redistribute the weight somehow because that's how windows work. Before you had aluminum, metal windows and things like that are attached and designed to hold a lot of weight. Wood frame windows, that's not going to work so well. So by having the brick and the stone, that allowed them to do that. Also, in addition to getting a lot of sunlight, this is also one of the first houses to have electricity and gas lamps. And specifically, this is just a fun passage here about the gas lamps, so the burners, they called them. Quote, all the burners are supplied with electrical appliances for lighting the gas, and by a system of push buttons can be lighted all over the house or in certain parts, only by pressing a button, and can be extinguished in a similar way. Oh, in the same way, sorry. So yeah, it's kind of novel in 1890 to have a button that can just illuminate your entire house. Go figure. And then they have all sorts of other things. They've got ornamental glass. They've got air flumes that ventilate the whole thing. They say that one cannot convey an adequate idea of its beauty by mere words, and that's a pretty good indication. So the Plumers end up living here for the next few years. Obviously, it's their home. It's a place where they house. They host different events, dances and social events, that sort of thing. But eventually, they do pass away. Daniel in 1920. Now, one of the legacies here that you may have heard, they don't have children. I'm pretty sure they don't have children. And so as a way of kind of continuing the legacy, Mary Plumer decides to memorialize her husband by building, basically jump-starting Memorial Hospital, or Wausau Hospital South, for those of you from that generation. So that kind of gets that up and running there. Yeah. But then she does pass away in 1928 herself, leaving the house ultimately to the Presbyterian Church. So the first Presbyterian Church, this is the second building. It's not the third one is the one that exists today. So this is the one that used to exist. You can see the Plumer Mansion kind of sticking out the side here. I was going to colorize it, but again, those trees make it kind of difficult. So I got a little lazy, but at least, you get the idea. So yeah, that's the Plumer Mansion sticking out there. They then buy it, and it becomes what they call a manse. Now, if you're not a Presbyterian, this is a very Presbyterian word. I think I've read that some Baptists and Methodists might use it too occasionally, but it's in this case it's a Presbyterian word. Basically, this is the home for the pastor, the reverend, the people that are the ministers, right? The people who are need a house nearby in order to do all that. It's a very big educational events and even some recreational stuff where they have get-togethers and stuff here too. But unfortunately, the Great Depression hits in the 30s. And at the deepest point of the Depression, it really hits churches like the Presbyterian Church, and so they decide to sell it. Now, I'm not sure specifically whether they sell it directly to the group that we're going to talk about next, or if there's an intermediate. But I think by 1938, it's purchased by the Milwaukee Journal. And you might be wondering, Milwaukee Journal, that's kind of strange. I mean, that's what I thought. Milwaukee Journal, how did they get into this? Well, this is kind of before the media conglomerates own all the newspapers in the state, that sort of thing. But the Milwaukee Journal does get into. They are here. There you can buy a paper. There's a local dealer. But in 1937, they actually help to finance. They're one of the financiers, that group behind the first radio station here. Now there had been a radio station down in Stevens Point that often broadcast from Wausau in the 30s, but in 37 we have one here, and so that's what WSAU. Which, as a note here, later they're going to change the call sign WSAW in order to kind of make it more consistent with the sort of standardization. But for a long time, you probably would know it as WSAU. So it was 1370 kilocycles. You could tune your radio into to hear them, and they went on the air the first time in 1937. Now, initially, their broadcasting, or at least their studio, is a refurbished space on the second floor of the Leith Building. It's a furniture company on First Avenue, the first 100 block of 3rd Street. That's where they are. However, again, back to Plumer Mansion, they buy it and it gets refurbished and turned. I believe in 1938 they kind of move in over there, although I could be wrong. It could take a little bit longer. But the radio station eventually gets put in there. That's what this picture is on the right is from. Yeah. But of course, if you're familiar with this story, you know that the radio station isn't the only thing that goes in there, because in 1948 they go through some pretty extensive renovations in order to accommodate the TV that goes in. So they have a new TV channel, Channel 7. And so the station, I think at this point, the radio station gets moved to a different location. And I should say that, they're not broadcasting, literally the antenna is not coming out here. This is where they, film things and then they, take it out to certainly by the TV station's day. But the operations, I think, get moved to another building, I'm told, near, McIndoe Street. But the TV station now is home here in Channel 7 in the Plumer Mansion. And here's some pictures here of that era. If you watch television here in the Wausau area in the 50s and 60s, you probably, whether you knew it or not, they were a lot of the stuff was filmed here at the Plumer Mansion. So some familiar faces here, if you're aware of this era. But eventually, the Plumer Mansion, while it's got a lot of character, it's not necessarily the best logistically to actually, produce things here. And so they end up moving over to Grand Avenue. They build a new building, which is, I believe, I'm pretty sure it's the same building that they still operate out of. I'm sure it's changed over the years, but 1970 they move out over there. Although this picture, by the way, is I think from 72, but it's a nice picture of the group of, influential, on-screen personalities and things like that. So this begs the question then, great, the TV station's out there, what happens to the Plumer Mansion? Well, that's a good question. We don't really have a solution at this point, so that becomes the question. Now, actually, Forward Communications, which is the company that then owns the TV and radio station here, that's what the company that owns it. They actually have a permit from the city to tear down the Plumer Mansion effective July 1st, 1970. But a group of people kind of step up and say, yeah, let's not do that. We shouldn't do that. These are letters to the editor. This is just a smattering of them. These 3 came within a day, 2 or 3 days. There might be a day separating 1 or 2 of them, but right in successive order, people writing in saying, no, we shouldn't tear this down. And they're talking about the history, pointing out the plumbers, this long history. It's this beautiful building. There's even some discussion. I like the here that that progress that they use in quotes, which is something that I think. I'm sure that you I know I have read people kind of use that same sort of energy in talking about progress for progress's sake today. You know, you can find that on Facebook right now. You can kind of scroll through and find somebody talking about, you know, decrying the destruction of old buildings for the new, which is, you know, justified. Sometimes, you know, maybe overblown, but, you know, whatever. It's not new, right? So these people, who is objecting to the idea of this? Well, they end up creating a committee, and that committee then creates a nonprofit corporation that becomes known as the D.L. Plumer Mansion Civic Center Incorporated. And it's interesting because this group of people, you know, it's described as a youth movement, and I was kind of like, I wonder if that's hyperbole, you know, or is the author just kind of, you know, saying this? But no, actually, you know, I looked up the committee members, and they are generally 18 to 24, I think was the oldest that I could find. You know, other people are going to jump on, but this is fun. And this is one of these interesting things is you don't expect a bunch of, you know, teenagers, early 20s, you know, that's not the kind of demographic that usually objects to history disappearing. But here they are, and they jumpstart this whole thing. And the group's goals are twofold. One, stop the destruction of the mansion, which they are able to kind of get push that back. But two, we need to find a better solution, because you can stop the destruction for a little bit, but ultimately you can't just leave it sitting there. So you need to raise money to figure out how to maintain it, and also come up with a more sustainable solution. And the one that they kind of push is they would like, or, you know, the best solution that's out there, and you can kind of tell from the name here, the Civic Center Incorporated. They'd like to see this become a resource for the community, for art, for education, for, you know, recreation. Make this a place that people can come and, you know, do stuff. But the first step is, let's save the building. In 1971, they bring up William Applegate, who is the assistant director of the Wisconsin Historical Society, and says, you know, what do you think? Can we get, you know, any state or federal funds to help us with this? And after taking a look the next day, there's a group of people that gather at the Historical Society, and he says, yeah, I don't really see this being something that's going to get any funding. And it's interesting. His justification here is essentially, it's a great architectural building, and it's very close, you know, the history of the Plumers. But if who are the Plumers? They're very important here in Wausau, but nobody else cares about them. So it's not likely to get money. And I think today, if the State Historical Society came up and said, the Plumers, we don't know who they are, nobody knows who they are, nobody cares, that's not what he's saying. It would seem kind of dismissive on first glance, but what he's actually talking about is, you know, remember, this is 1971. This is very early in the cycle of historic preservation. There's not a lot of money out there to help, you know, keep the buildings up. And so they kind of have to pick their battles. And so, you know, what they're going to fund is stuff that gets the most bang for their buck, the most historic, the most important. And, you know, a national figure or a regional figure is going to have a lot more, you know, traction than a couple who was really important to a smallish city in central Wisconsin, you know, not small, big for central Wisconsin, but you know what I mean, relatively speaking. But he says, so he says that, he says, like, likely it wouldn't get funding, but if you really want to see this succeed, what you need to do is get the community involved. You know, if people want to see this building not be destroyed, then ask for donations, get the money from the people. And so they set out to raise the money. They have a goal of $50,000. You know, they ask pledge cards in the newspaper, they go around asking for money. But ultimately, it's not successful. They're not able to raise the money, and in 1972, the building comes down. And I think it's worth noting here that nobody... Okay, I don't know that nobody did. I think there may be, from what I can tell, there may be one or two people that are kind of hinted at, you know, like we know who, everybody then knew who they were, but that maybe wanted this to be the case. But I think, you know, realistically, forward communications, you know, obviously this people of Wausau in general, I don't think even the Presbyterian Church wanted to see this come down and become a parking lot for their congregation. But that's what ends up happening. And this is maybe, you know, a shock, right? It's a shock because, you know, and you see this again in the newspapers, the letters to the editor, and, you know, are we lacking city pride? What happened? I think there's a sentiment of, hey, I thought we saved that. There's a whole group of people that are going to do something about that, right? What happened? Why didn't they do that? And in response to this, like as they're lining up the machinery to take it down, there's another letter to the editor that says like, "Hey, we need to save this. This is now the chance. Like, I'll pledge $100 if 50 other people do. We can stop this." And they kind of have to step in, and the committee says like, "Where were you a year ago when we were asking for money? We've been wanting. You can't just show up at the very last second and save this. That's just not how this works." And unfortunately, that's what ends up happening. In response to this, another person writes in, Norma here, and she says, maybe it's not civic pride. We don't lack that, but it's a lack of coordination and cooperation. Maybe there should be a committee. And I think this is right on the mark here. Like I think the uproar over the destruction of the Plumer Mansion, the wound that it kind of left, that people, to this day talk about how, that should never have come down. Well, that shows that people cared. It's just how do we harness that? Oh. So I will note that the next year, a group. This is for like the centennial, but in 1970, 73 is that what it is? Well, the Charter Centennial. Yeah. So this is part of 72. So later that year, they do a historic homes tour, and I think this is important to note too. Historic preservation is not just about stopping that building last minute. Let's stop it from being taken down. It's about celebrating historical buildings, the historical preservation that is occurring, and recognizing the great stuff the resources that we already have. 1975, the city of Wausau creates the Wausau Historic Landmarks Commission, which is designed to landmark. Whoops, I put an extra S in there. Sorry about that. Anyway, the group is essentially, put there to designate local landmarks, to identify the stuff that is worth keeping around and the stuff that's in danger of disappearing. They have sort of it's a long road. Just because there is we appoint the people to the commission and that we have a commission does not mean that stuff doesn't get lost. It is going to be it is still a long process. Even to this day, it's not a given that just because the committee says no doesn't mean that stuff can't happen. But it's a start, and I think that's what's really important here. These buildings, from this generation, people recognized the loss. These are just three. I think people really like the red granite, the red brick. But the courthouse in 1952, the First National Bank came down, and now the Plumer Mansion. These are buildings that should not have been like. The new courthouse is great, but it doesn't have that character. The Plumer Mansion is something that we should do something. That's unfortunate that we lost that. We should have saved it. I think even today, even though it's not, Wausau Center Mall, it's kind of maybe I don't know if it's the same thing, but like I think there are people who are saying, well, why couldn't somebody step up and do something about that? And the truth is, it's hard. It's not just a matter of saying yes. Everybody thinks this should, a solution should come here. It's a lot more involved. And that recognition of it's not just a matter of saying no thanks, we would like to keep that building, the Plumer Mansion should be around. That's you need to find solutions and be able to find mechanisms to make sure that stuff happens. And so yeah, I think overall the Plumer Mansion, getting destroyed in in the early 70s did spark that, and it did, it's a shame. But it wasn't destroyed for nothing. It did set us on this path and led to a more, at least more aware of our resources, our historic resources, and we're going to be spending the next month talking about some of those resources. Not just it, and the good news here is the Plumer Mansion is the only one that we're talking about that is not here anymore. The others are all going to be success stories in various ways, at least as of this recording. So that's what our plan is. Next week, Gary Gisselman will be back, and he will be talking about the Federal Building, which is kind of taking this story. You have the establishment of the Historic Preservation Committee, the Wausau Historic Landmark Commission, and how do we actually see this taking place? So yeah, hopefully you will join us for that next week. As always, it's at 12:30 on Thursdays. Okay, so that's what I had prepared. I'm going to now shift over and check to see here. Again, if you have any questions, any comments, this is the time to do that. Oop, let me just again, new program here. I'll just go back to the. There we go. That way I'm on camera. So again, if you have any questions, any comments, this is the time here. Don't need to if nothing comes to mind though. I appreciate everybody joining us, joining me for this. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's see. Let's see. Someone said not like the story, like the April Fool's one. That's true. Yes. This is actually true this time. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna give it a second here, but I think that might be the extent of the comments, which is fine. Again, I thanks so much for joining us, and yeah, we hope to see you in the future for our next History Speaks. I hope you all have a wonderful day.